our data in math, we could see that it was not exactly where we wanted it to be, and we weren't seeing some of the trend data that we wanted to see for math over a number of years, both pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And then we also took our educators' feedback from both building leadership teams at the middle school on top of that, where they basically said, you know, we have students that have some skill holes, and the tools that we currently have don't have enough reteaching resources in them to help us fill those holes as we see them struggling in our classes, instead of waiting for them to have a big enough gap in their skill level to where we have to place them in a math skills class or something separate. So that's how all three of those kind of came together.
Gotcha. And they're doing 2 pilots for each subject?
Yes.
Like 2 separate ones? Is each, like say if we select a teacher to pilot, is that teacher doing both of them, or do we kind of divvy them up that only teacher's doing one and then they kind of compare notes?
Yep, so each teacher is doing one. So we've divided them up so that each middle school is doing at least one of each of the programs at each grade level, so that we can get a sense of what that program looks like at that grade level, and then any questions or concerns the teachers might have while they're implementing it, then we bring them back together and they compare their data, their lesson plans, their notes, their questions and concerns.
When do we think that we'll want to purchase that, or go, if we decide to go forward with that? Were we targeting like next school year, beginning of next school year, or?
So the committees should be ready to bring reports to the board in April and May, and preferably in April, so that we can provide training for everyone and send them away with their materials over the summer, so that they can review them, and then we would look to begin implementing them next year.
All right, perfect, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Holly? Thank you, Holly.
All right, thank you.
Next, under discussion, we have the funding and pavement rehabilitation agreement with Burke Jones.
Good evening, I'm Burke Jones, Director of Operations. Tonight I bring a project that's a joint project between the DRC, the City of Derby, and USD 260. This project involves private streets, Louisa and Bulldog Drive. So if you think about where the operations building is, it involves the north-south road, which is Bulldog, that runs behind the fire station and like west of the fire station and west of the operations building. And then Louisa is the east-west street between the operations building and the Hubbard Arts Center, and kind of south of the central, or north of the central kitchen. So when this came up like over a year ago, I looked at what we were required to do, because they are private streets. We own them. And based upon the recorded plats through Sedgwick County, that whole Bulldog Drive is on our property, as well as all of Louisa. And so at that point, I reached out to Kyle Mangus at the City of Derby and Chris Drum at the DRC and said, you know, I know by the letter, like, I think this is our responsibility. Like, it says that. Like, the landowner is responsible to maintain these streets, but you guys use those streets. And so would you guys be willing to kick in any money to help us rehabilitate these roads, because they're in really bad shape? And so we began to look at it as a group. And in the agreement in your board packet, it spells out what the percentages are. So the district would pay 77.7%, the DRC would pay 13.9%, and the city would pay 8.4%. And the way that we came to those figures was that the DRC is paying for basically half the portion of the street that they use. So we have half of that, they have half of that along Louisa for the Hubbard Arts Center. And then the city said, hey, from our property line at the fire station up to where we need to not replace anything anymore, they would cover that cost. Additionally, the city is paying for all costs associated with the engineering and the design of the project. They're handling all of the bidding on the project, and all of the costs associated with the project inspection and during the construction timeframe. So they are basically running the project at no additional cost for us. We would have had to hire a civil engineer to detail these streets out per city standards, get a permit from the city, have the city review it, go through all of that, handle all the bidding. But the city's taken that on as part of a much larger street maintenance projects that they do all over. So our prices are also much better. We initially received some budget numbers from a trusted contractor that we work with a lot that exceeded $200,000 for this project. And as you can see at this point, the city's estimating it to be $120,000 with $12,000 of a contingency on top of that. So I did receive a question before the board meeting about back in 2016 when we sold the city the land for the fire department and demolished the sixth grade center or portions of it. And so during the meeting, Latona was able to find those board action items from April of 2016 when that property sale happened. And there's no language in there like about the city's taking the streets back as far as like a city-owned street or anything like that. And the plat that was in the board packet looks like the plat that was recorded at the county. So it shows us owning the road west of the fire station. Like that's our land. So with all that being said, Calvin Ryder has reviewed this agreement, and the city is queued up to, after we take action, they're ready to take action to get this project going. So with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Questions, Berkeley, Matt?
So thanks for chasing that information down. Maybe it was just discussion that we talked about giving the land back. That's just, I remember talking about it. I would like to see what the numbers, don't change the packet, but I would like to see what the percentages change like when you figure in what the city is contributing as far as their civil engineering manpower and stuff. Because I think it's more of an optics thing. In reality, we're probably only paying 50% of the road costs, and then I'm okay with it. So
Sure.
just for, on a side note, just put it on the side. Tell us what it would have been if we'd have had to go fund that, or you know what I'm saying.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead, Jim.
So in all fairness, I was the one that asked that question, just because I remember a conversation, and if it's not in there, that's fine. It must, obviously it wasn't the will of the board that it be in there, but I do remember having that conversation about that road. That's why I asked the question. I wasn't asking it to be difficult or to cause
No,
trouble.
it's a fair question.
I just remembered having that conversation, so, but I agree. I'd like to see some breakdown of numbers. 77%, it seems like it's a lot, but if you add in everything that the city is doing as well, then it probably does equal out, but I would like to have the information as
Sure.
well. But like I said, sorry I caused such a firestorm
No,
before the meeting on that, but I
You did
just
not. I
remembered
think
the
it's a
different
very fair
conversation.
question because it's very confusing when you look at our parcel of land looks like a flagpole. Like we have the land where our building sits and then we own the street that goes out to Madison. So it's very unusual. It would have been great if it was cleaned up better way back when, but it wasn't. So,
I think we tried to give this street back to the city and they wouldn't take it.
right. And I will say the city, when they did the fire department, they improved the road from Madison down to like past where their trucks pull into the fire department. So they did improve that portion of the road already, and then we're just kind of finishing it off to their property line.
Other questions? Go ahead.
So, and I think originally we talked about this, I had a few questions. Why is this private and not a city street? I mean, is this unique? Does this happen in other areas of the city? I just don't understand, because this is a public road, we can't limit access,
Right.
correct?
That's correct. We can't. So it's all, there,
Why
it's,
is it a private street? That, I've not
I
understood
don't
that
know,
question.
but for as long as I can find like plats, like previous plats and stuff, it's been that way.
So
it's
if we put a barricade up and said it's ours, limit access, is that okay?
No,
I mean,
we can't do
That's
that.
the test
So I
that
think
would
it
have
goes
is-
back, I really think it goes back to when the sixth grade center was there. Those were all roads that were used for circulation around the sixth grade center.
Right,
I have a feeling whenever that was built, those were parking lot roads, and now they're city streets.
So it wasn't probably an easement that when the city took over for the fire station, they just didn't take that into theirs, so
I
that's
think
now an
they tried to
easement.
give it back and they wouldn't take it back.
That's what I
why
suspect.
That's why that's why we own it, it's still public, we can't do anything with it, it's an easement to the property that we own.
yeah, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, I mean,
Yeah, at one point, there was a
I
road
don't understand.
south of the soccer field that would cut between the soccer field and the tennis courts that was vacated. So at some point, there was even a road there.
Real estate's funky.
Yeah, no, I guess the question would be, if it's not a public street, I mean, if it's a public street that people can access, how are we responsible to maintain it? That doesn't make sense to me. And if that's the case, can we just limit access to it, make it a parking lot and get rid of it? I mean, is that an option?
Yeah.
Not that I wanna do that, I'm just asking questions kinda, cause it doesn't make sense to me, the structure, and that we have to maintain it.
Yeah, I asked that question, like, well, then if that's the case, then we'll just close it, We can't do that.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
But as far as the scope goes, the sharing nature of the cost, I think that all sounds fine if we have to do it. I'm not necessarily opposed. The concept just doesn't make sense to me why we're maintaining it as a school district and not the city. So
Yeah.
if there's more clarification on that we can get, that would be really helpful.
I will see what I can do to get some clarification on that.
And what, if there's any other options to have it become the cities, I think that makes a lot more sense. And it's because it's not really in the scope of what we do, it doesn't seem like, especially because it's public access. If it's our parking lot, I get it, we gotta maintain it, so.
Right.
Thank you.
So, question, Burke, initially this came up, you said about a year ago, so who brought this up first? Was it the school? Was it the city?
It was us.
It was us?
Yeah, we had it in our 5-year plan, because the whole road's beginning to fall apart. Like, and we drive on it, we utilize it, and it's in really bad shape.
So, we've talked about like, when we've redone like parking lots and stuff that we own, if we didn't do anything for the next 5 years on this, would we be doing the same job then as we are now? Like, this is gonna be a total,
It's
Total
not
strip.
actually a total full depth replacement. We're going to be able to mill and overlay some of the asphalt, which saves us a significant amount of money. There's some areas we're going to have to take all the way back down to the dirt and rebuild back up. So it's not, where there's asphalt, it's not, the longer we wait, the more expensive it's going to get. Some of it's concrete, and so to fix that, we have to tear out the concrete and pour new concrete.
I mean, the reason I ask, so I think last week, the city council talked about this, they were going through their same side of the deal. They mentioned the condition of the street, so I drove down the street on the way to the board meeting today. With the exception of like, I'd say if you took all of Louisa and maybe cut it into fourths, like the last fourth before you get to Madison isn't the best. But here's a funny thing, those roads there look better or the same than all the roads in my entire neighborhood. So, I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't have nice roads if we're responsible for them, but I don't know. I mean, Bulldog honestly doesn't look that bad. I'm not sure what the complaints are there, but.
I think Bulldog is mostly trying to mill and overlay before we have to do a full depth replacement.
Right.
And so it's just a cost, it comes purely down to cost.
Okay. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I was just curious where it kind of came from, what the big priority was on this just one little area, because
And we've patched some areas of it. I mean, at some point, we're throwing patch money away because it's just going to keep failing. So that's kind of where it came from.
okay, fair enough. Any other questions for Burke? Go ahead.
Okay, I think most of them have got my questions. So I'd like to know how many city or shared streets are privately owned in the city limits. I'm interested to know that. I still think, I mean, if we're gonna be upkeeping and paying for this, I mean, this parking lot over across from the food service that says it's our property, is that our parking lot?
Yeah.
Is that-
South of the tennis courts, that's our parking lot.
So I have only parked there when I went to Hubbard Arts.
Right. There is definitely it's a shared parking agreement with Hubbard Arts.
Okay, so they would pay to fix that parking lot too, or be part of that?
When
or-
we need a replacement, that would be a fair discussion to have with them.
Okay. I just don't understand why, I mean, I understand that this was the middle school property and it used to be the drives. I mean, I remember this from years and years ago. And I feel like we made a poor choice by not including this in the sale or flipping this around. And I don't want to continue that mistake by not dealing with it. I mean, I think we need to look at, this is a shared road. And this is not our area of expertise, is maintaining roads. I mean, we've got enough on our plate, and this is $100,000 that we'd be spending on kids. And I hate taking money away from our kids to fix a road that really isn't horrible and not, I mean, if anything, I'd say shut it down and it's our property, we'll, find another way around, we can shorten it and fix that quarter or whatever, but yeah, I'd go back to the city and see what we can do. We have good relationships, right? So I would hope that we could come up with something.
Okay.
Thanks for.
Any other questions for Bert? Okay, thank you, Bert, appreciate
All
it.
right, thank you.
Next, we have the Derby High School math pre-algebra change with Dr. Holly Putnam Jackson.
Okay. Good evening, Dr. Putnam Jackson. Here to discuss a request for a pre-algebra change. Historically, at the high school, for our graduation credits, we have required 3 credits for students before they graduate. Those credits have consisted of courses that are algebra or higher. And so as you look at your memo there, you will see the list of courses that we currently would count as one of our 3 credits for an algebra graduation requirement. The request has come for pre-algebra to count as a credit towards graduation. And the request comes, I think, for a couple of different reasons. One, because we're seeing for some of our students that are graduating from high school that earning the higher level of algebra, so they're usually pretty good with Algebra 1, usually pretty good with geometry. But then getting into those higher level math courses presents a challenge for some of our students towards graduation. And then the second thing that came our way was that there are many other districts, like we are one of 2 other districts locally who still require the higher level math credits. That for some time now, others have included pre-algebra or actually any level of math that's appropriate for the students' skill level as part of their credits, as long as they take 3. So with that, we had some conversations. We did some checking and verifying with other local districts as well as some in the Kansas City area, one of the ones that we visited. And part of the conversation, as we did some fact-finding around their decision-making process, revolved around the thought of there are many careers and things that students can go out into the world and do that may not necessarily require math, that is above the algebra and geometry that even a student who earned pre-algebra credit might typically need. So with that, this one returns for approval during the next meeting, but I wanted to see what questions you might have.
Go ahead, or-
Go ahead,
Yeah.
I don't care.
I'll just tell you, I'm really excited about this because I have a son has difficulty in math. So if this was to pass, would that then, if his graduating class is 2026, could he then use the pre-algebra as his?
So you ask a fair question, and it is actually one that I've discussed as we were talking about bringing this forward. And that is, and it actually came up as we were working with students on their IPS plans on Thursday and Friday, and they were talking about the colleges that they were planning to go to. And that is some of them, not a lot, but a good handful of them actually kind of looked at us and said, well, you know, I think I could go to that college. I can do algebra and I can do math or geometry. I can even do college algebra per se, but I can't do like AP calculus, or I don't have an interest in that, and I don't think I would need it to become whatever their thing may be. And so typically when we adopt these kinds of changes, it doesn't impact the students in this class. It would be in future years, so the freshmen starting next year. But if we wanted to, and it were approved, that would definitely be something that we could consider, that would provide some relief for our students. They still have to get 3 math credits. Everybody still has to get past geometry, and if you have an interest, or if you're recommended to be there or placed there, you can still take the higher level classes. But that could be something that the board could consider if they wish.
Thank you.
Mr. Joyce? Sorry.
Honestly, when I saw this, I was kind of surprised because every high school I've ever been to, pre-algebra always counted as a credit. So, and so did math lab, so I was kind of shocked to see this. Just a derby thing, that we just set it up that way?
It is. It's a Derby thing, and then there was one other district, I think a Mulvane thing possibly also was the other district that is doing it, but they also don't offer lower level classes. And so the thing that we see this does, for our students who are not, math is just not their thing. Maybe they're really strong with hands-on subjects,
I understand
English.
that. I
Yeah,
understand that.
it presents a challenge for them.
And to touch on what she was saying earlier, if we were to say to go ahead and implement it this year, how many people could go ahead and graduate then if they had their 3 credits? Do you have a number, or?
I don't have a number, but I could look it up for you.
Because I don't see any reason why we couldn't go ahead and implement it this year. Why wait till next year? That just sounds ridiculous.
Yep.
Especially since it's been,
I agree with you, Matt.
yeah, it's like, are you kidding? I honestly couldn't believe that. So, I would seriously get those numbers, and I would seriously consider changing the proposal that we make it effective this year, not wait till next year.
Okay, and just so I have clarification, when I'm looking at the numbers, I look at everybody from freshmen to seniors? Okay,
Everybody that it would help. How many kids?
absolutely.
Not so much who's gonna graduate this year if they had it, but how many kids would it help?
Okay, no
Thank you.
problem, happy to do it.
So nobody throw their drinks at me, please, but I'm gonna really disagree with probably, well, however many people, doesn't matter. I don't think that lowering I don't think this is a good idea. How long has Derby been doing this? Well, how long has this been our graduation been a requirement?
I'll have to go back and figure out when we adopted it through board memos, but it's been a requirement ever since I came in 2017, and my understanding is it's been a requirement many years before that.
Yeah, I don't think, I don't think it's a good idea. I think we should challenge our kids. I think if there's kids that struggle with math, we should try to help them. I don't think we should make graduation easier. I know that's probably not popular to say, and there's a lot of people that get really angry when you bring up graduation rates, things like that, but I just, I'd rather see some way to get those students help that need it rather than make it easier. I like that, if Derby and Mulvane stand out among our region for those, requirements, I think that's a good thing. I don't think that's a bad thing, so.
Yeah, and I think that came up in conversation some too. It's just that kind of tug and pull, but it came up, I think, a lot less frequently than probably the other side. with even maybe some questions about like, well, when do you actually use it? And I think it really does vary depending upon what you do and what your career path is. And so I think that the counterbalance to that, just in conversations I've had, has been along the lines of, if it's not absolutely essential, then what's, the why? Like, we're challenging them to use it, where and when and how, like, what's the benefit of that? And what's the counterbalance for students? So there's definitely multiple perspectives and sides to this conversation.
Any other questions?
So I'm kind of with Michael on this, where I feel like lowering our standards, it's kind of like the bigotry of low expectations, and I don't necessarily like that. And even though I hate saying it, I'm well educated, however, I wasn't very good at math, but I didn't think I wanted to do anything that had to do with math. But you go to normal college and you have to take these classes. So before I could get into college algebra, I had to take like 3 different college math classes to qualify to get into college algebra, which delayed my degree a whole nother like 1.5 to 2 years. So it did not set me up for success. And I hate the idea that, while yes, we're saying, yeah, have your plan of study, you should know what you want to, these kids don't know what they want to do. They looked at some book or took some quiz, or they know somebody who may have done that. They don't, if they've never had exposure to the medical field, and then suddenly they get that exposure, or now they went and had their teeth cleaned, they're like, man, maybe I should be a dental hygienist. I think even, what is this? It's like when you start college, they change their major 7 times by the time they graduate.
Some do.
And even if it's your trade, whatever it is, but this basic foundation of algebra and math, it's important. And I would even do that with my kids, write out dimensional analysis. Okay, this is how many milliliters you need. This is why math is important, kids, kind of thing. If I went too much, if I moved my decimal point, I could kill you. And they're like, what? And so, just showing them that it's important and finding ways to reach these kids and make math fun. And, I would rather invent better ways to make sure that we're teaching the subject than just dumbing down our expectation to.
Okay, well, here's my deal on this. I understand where you guys are coming from, but I have a son who's, has struggled in math, and we've done everything. We've done all the interventions. It's just tough. And I don't say let's stop pushing our kids, but if you have a child who maybe is anxious or has anxiety, giving them a little bit of, hope, and then maybe pushing them, if they do want to go into a degree that requires more math, just as a counselor, working with them and saying, okay, since you did pre-algebra, and granted you're going to have all your credits, if you really want to go down this path, then we need to start helping you get to that point, and then, they can take a 4th math credit. I'm just saying, from my perspective and as a mother, I just watch him struggle. I've spent tons of money on math tutors, and he had all that intervention. Now, granted, it was a bit of a crappy thing for him during 6th, 7th, and 8th grade when he was home, and he missed a lot of those math foundations, but I'm just saying it gives, I think, kids that may not be good at math a little bit of a, oh, look, I can do this, but then still push them. I think there has to be some type of a happy medium, I would think.
So just speaking from my own perspective, I know in Manhattan, it was always, we had kids they took math lab, pre-algebra, and then they took algebra 1. And those kids didn't need more math. That was their 3 credits. Whereas someone like me who went in engineering, I jumped everything, went algebra 1, algebra 2, took geometry and trigonometry the same year, and then went into college prep calculus, I think it was, at Manhattan High, because they had a whole stuff set up geared toward K-State and engineering. So I'm with her on this. It just, you're getting algebra, and a lot of jobs out there you don't need more than algebra. That's just the perspective I'm coming from. And it was that way at Lucky High and Manhattan High. I think both schools were that way. But that's just my own little knot hole, so, anyway.
Holly, if you could, on the classes that are approved for math credits, there's a lot of names in there that weren't on the list when I was in high school. So I don't know, did you list, like, are they from Algebra 1 clear down to principles? Is that hard, did you say it's easiest to hardest? Or are they in any type of order?
So the Math 3 and Thinking Mathematically, actually, they are pretty much in order of complexity, except for the principles, I think, of engineering, that very last one. But the others, all of the ones there are in levels of complexity. I say that with a caveat, though. And here's the thing that's tricky with math, is the way students understand math concepts. For some kids, calculus is actually way simpler than geometry. And for some students, geometry is much easier because they can visualize it. They have an engineering brain than the algebra may be. And so it almost varies depending upon the kind of math and how students visualize the spatial movement that you might be doing when you're calculating the hypotenuse of a triangle, and what that different degrees might mean for the shape of the triangle itself. That it depends on how they conceptualize math as to which class is most complex for them. But the way we're listed out here speaks to the typical level of complexity for your students.
Perfect.
Okay.
Any other questions?
News, can't say it.
Go ahead.
Just a comment. I know, sorry, I just totally identified with what you said because, I mean, I'll be real. Geometry killed me, but I understood algebra too. You know, it's like I barely made it through geometry, but algebra made perfect sense to me. This one's tough. I do understand both sides of this one because, I mean, I have two kids that are completely different. One went all the way to calculus, loved every bit of it. The other one was like, yeah, I'm just getting my college credit and I'm out. So I think that math, I agree with you. Math is one of those things that it's very telling, and I don't know if it's necessarily lowering our standards to include it, but I think for a lot of people who don't understand this, they have kids who haven't struggled with math. You know, like maybe, for instance, my senior now was in pre-algebra in 7th grade. So it's a hard one to try to figure out what the right thing to do is as far as that goes. So, but I would like to see how many kids this would help, and if it's helping them, I guess I'd like to understand how it's really working, because ultimately once they get to college, if they're on that college track, they have to take college algebra anyway.
Yeah.
So,
And typically your Algebra 1 paired with geometry would prepare them mostly for college algebra. There may be a few things or algorithms and processes that are new or more complex, but for your average student, that typically would set them up for that, which is why you see a lot of our kids will take algebra, geometry, and then they'll take college algebra again, just so they can get the college credit for it, even though they know the majority of the concepts. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
All right, so I will return with some data to share with you all, and I appreciate the conversation. Very different perspectives on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have our property insurance action with John Regier.
All right. Good evening. John Regier, Director of Finance. In your packet, you've got a short memo talking about property insurance. So over the last few weeks, been working with a couple of local partners to see what if we could get any indication of what a property insurance outside of the Kansas Educational Risk Management Pool would look like. Worked with two different groups, Fee Insurance as well as IMA. Like we talked about last time, they looked at two very different perspectives. Fee insurance looks at more of the fully insured situation. They also were looking at a property insurance pool out of the Kansas and Missouri area that does both cities, counties, and school districts, and then IMA looks at more of the self-funded. Coming back tonight, we weren't able to get real concrete information. A lot of the groups say, well, we're not going to write you right now. You're 6 months, 5+ months away from the plan actually starting. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. So they were unwilling to give us some solid quote at that point in time, just because a lot can happen between now and July 1, so they didn't want to have any sort of binding quotes. So working with both of them, they couldn't give us any solid indication of where the price would be. I know that was kind of important to the board, not having, if we were to exit the pool, what kind of risk we were taking on at this point in time. But without any solid indication, that it does seem a little bit too risky. Well, all working through these two groups, one piece did come up is we could still spin off the workers' compensation portion of our property insurance to a local group. We know last year when we talked, we have had some mod experience ratings. We've had some larger claims. So bringing somebody local in could help not only with those claims, but then also help build a relationship for property insurance in the future. So that's kind of option one. Option two would be to completely exit the pool, knowing that there could be a higher property premium increase for next year. Or option three would be to stay in the pool. For this point in time, I would make a recommendation, as well as Mr. Jones, we talked a little bit, would be to stay in the pool for one more year, knowing that, these two groups weren't able to give us any concrete information, but spinning off that workers' compensation group. We both work on workers' compensation and know that we do need some more assistance and more localized help there, as well, because our current group that administers that is out of Kansas City, so we don't get as much face time or availability for face time. So that would be my recommendation, with the intent of looking to exit the pool 7/1 of '24. We spend basically the year with this workers' compensation group, and then kind of building what property insurance looks like. That be happy to add a board member to like a subcommittee to kind of help build our property insurance plan, looking at deductible structures and coverages would be something we could look at over the next year. So with that, I know it's a lot of information that probably wasn't in the packet. I would stand for any questions.
John, if we were to get a quote, when's the date that we can exit the pool versus when the board could have a quote for something else?
So we have to notify the Kermit group by January 31st of every year if we want to have coverage for 7/1 of later on in that year. For getting a quote, a lot of the groups, we're going to basically give you a kind of a 90-day situation. So for a 7/1 plan, back that up 90 days, we're looking at March, April timeframe before they'd be willing to give a quote. So we're kind of in this hard pattern here. I'm not sure if that's by design from the pool or what, but that is just going to be honest with where we've kind of come into with the groups that we've talked to is like, hey, there's a little bit of a timing situation here.
So we're not going to be able to get a quote until we have already made the decision to leave the pool.
Correct. That's where I thought if we start spinning off the workers' comp, we kind of spend the year of building the group or building the property insurance, how we want it to look, so that we can get a solid quote and then have that exit plan for the 24-25 school year.
Okay. Go ahead.
Did Fee or IMA have a recommendation for how we might get a quote in the timing that we have, or did they just say we're out of luck based on the pool we're in? I mean, how do they get new business from people that are in the pool, or is
The ones that they've pulled out of the pool are kind of more people that are fed up with the price that they may have been getting, or they felt they wanted to have some more flexibility in the coverages or deductibles, the whole 9 yards. So that's kind of where their standpoint is. We've got good service with them. We have a great deductible structure now when it comes to wind and hail damage. We've got good deductible structures and have increased our service with our any of our property claims or any of our accidents that we've been in. So we, from a service standpoint and a price standpoint from, every day has been pretty nice. It's just that sticker price when we do our renewal in that June timeframe is when we start to have a little bit of heartburn from them.
So what creates the heartburn? The increase or knowing, relatively speaking, that there is better pricing from, how do we know that we're off? Or what creates that feeling?
The heartburn is
Other
just,
than
you
writing the
get
big
you get an increase. It's hard, and then when you don't feel like there's a lot of competition. We've had groups or insurance companies have actually pulled out of insuring schools. We have a lot of risk in a short area. We cover 50 square miles. We have $300 million worth of insured value, and a storm could take out multiple buildings in one track. You look at where we're at right here comparative to the high school, compared to Tanglewood and El Paso, one line, that's a lot of value that goes out. I deal in real absolutes. So that's where there's a risky part there. So the heartburn does come in where it's big increases. But again, when you look at the total insured value, you have to kind of take that into perspective compared to where we used to, or how much we used to pay for property insurance.
Do these other providers provide an idea as to what the market's doing at least? Are they seeing increases the same amount we have seen through the pool, or,
Over the last few years, the property insurance market has kind of hardened. People got out of this area. It's starting to kind of level out, and that's why by giving another year, maybe more groups will come back in. As a school district, we're solid business because we do need the property insurance. So, and we do have the funds to cover it. So maybe groups will come back in after a couple of years out of a cooling off period. So that's kind of the other piece that I was working through this. We've seen some improvements over the last couple of years. After 2-3 years before that was pretty rough, and that kind of gives us some more good competitive advantage going forward.
okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for John?
Move to approve his recommendation.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? All right.
Perfect. Thank you.
John. All right, lastly, we have an executive session. I move that the board go into executive session for the purpose of discussing matters relating to employer-employee negotiations, whether or not in consultation with the representative or representatives of the body or agency to protect the district's rights to confidentiality of its negotiating position in the public interest for 20 minutes, following a 5-minute break. So we will come back at 9:36.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Okay, motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you.